Oh hello, welcome to another video. In today's video we're going to go through the Q1 2024 Bans Dataslate. Now I know this has been out for a little while, but I wanted to go through it a little bit more thoroughly and forensically. So, just to give you a brief overview, some of you, even though this has been out for a good number of days now, may not know it exists because once again Games Workshop failed to put up a MetaWatch article, which is a real shame because I really enjoy those MetaWatch articles because you get real insight into why the designers have made changes, like the rationale and intent behind the changes, rather than just here's a load of things, right? There was a surprising number of changes to the long-standing community bugbears, things that have changed for teams that people have been kind of moaning about for a long time, and Games Workshop wasn't changing them, and so you assumed it was all part of their plan, right? So this makes me think they've had some feedback from playtesters. Presumably, we know there's a new edition on the cards. Presumably they've been playtesting and rebalancing all of the teams for what we assume will happen, which is a new compendium. And so, if they've got changes they can implement now, it makes sense to implement whatever they can now, so that when we see a new compendium for the new edition, there's less comparative change. Does that make sense? That's what I think is probably happening anyway. So we're going to kick off with some core rules changes. I'll read the changes first. So first of all, jump tests are automatically successful. Do not roll. And then that's in all modes, by the way, not just Beta Decima. And then when you're playing on Beta Decima, the restricted line of sight rules, so the steam that comes off the bubbling swimming pool, it makes the target operative not visible rather than obscured, right? And the final one I want to read out is tactical ploys that allow one or more operatives to be set up outside of your drop zone, e.g. Sneaky Git, Commando, and Dimensional Translocation for Hierotek circles. Such operatives must be set up wholly within 2 circle of your drop zone. Now, these changes feel like cowardice to me. Now, I know those are big words. I'm going to try and justify it, okay? So, when they released Beta Decima, I really felt like they knew what they were doing, or what they wanted to do. The idea of having a map where you can jump from platform to platform, right, or, you can walk around the outside and climb up. And there's a choice there. One might take you 2 turning points to maneuver into position. One is much quicker, but comes with a small risk of catastrophic failure. To me, that's an interesting question, right? Do you play, do you take the high risk, high reward option, or do you do it the sensible and safe way, walking around on the ground floor and climbing up? So, I don't know. Obviously, it had problems, but I just think it's a real shame they didn't tweak it a bit, something like, if you fail a jump test, then you still jump, but you lose an APL, or you take some mortal wounds, or change the consequence in some way rather than just you just stand there and your movement ends. I guess maybe it was too harsh, but the core idea of having different ways via the kill zone, some of which were risky and some of which aren't, I thought was quite interesting. But competitive players are really happy, and I guess Games Workshop's focus for most of it, especially for 40k, Age of Sigmar, Kill Team, and Warhammer Underworld, is very much on keeping the competitive players happy. And I guess if the game's fun and competitive, it does trickle down, and it makes it fun for everybody. I get that stuff. But yeah, I mean, you only have to watch some of the other videos out there to know how happy some of the competitive players are with this change. So I'm just a bit wistful, because I think there was a grain of a good kind of interesting idea in there, and I like games to have a little bit of interest, right? And I feel kind of the same way about the restricted line of sight. So they changed it from obscured to not visible. So the nuance here is they were abilities in the game that let you ignore obscuring. Indeed, they recently handed out a load extra ignores obscuring abilities. For example, the the Hearthkyn Auspex, they went back and handed out removes obscuring to that. In this very balanced data slate, and we get to it later, for the Hearthkyn, they've handed out removes obscuring to the Hearthkyn Auspex type fellow. Like, it seemed to me, and it still kind of seems like they've settled on, okay, Auspex type things, they're going to remove obscuring, so we're going to make sure people have obscuring as a buff, and then we're going to make sure teams have a way to remove obscuring. And I thought that was good, like, you know, because we've got this roster of kind of stock specialists, right? You've got gunners and heavy gunners, you've got comms, you've got medic, you know, you've got these things that we're used to seeing, and having the solidifying the kind of the Auspex guy, and this is what he does, he removes obscuring. I felt that was interesting and opened up some interesting design space. I get that there's problems around Pathfinders and Phobos, where it's not one guy that can remove obscuring and you can play it. Like, I think it's interesting if the team that you're playing against has a guy that can see through obscuring, and you can play around that position of that one guy, and prioritize trying to kill him and that kind of thing. That's cool. I think having entire teams that can get round obscuring, obviously is going to be more oppressive. I just wonder if it couldn't have been changes to those two teams, potentially, rather than just going, oh, whatever, we'll just turn it off and make it visible. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. I feel like everything else I'm going to say in the video isn't that interesting. I feel this slide really has my two hot takes on, and everybody else, it seems like, is really celebrating. Some people celebrating almost an obnoxious amount, these changes, and I just think it's a little bit sad. I don't know. And people still don't like Better Decima. People still go, oh, Better Decima. So, I don't know. The change for operatives being set up too far forward, though, I think that's quite sensible. Like, 2 circles is still really meaningful, and it just stops people being quite so far forward as maybe they could be. Yeah, no problems there with that last change. But those first two, I understand why they've done it, and I'm happy people are happy, and maybe a more balanced game is better for everybody. And I don't want to rubbish the more competitive players who are better at the game, and I don't want to diminish almost their takes are more valid than mine. Like, that's unambiguously true. If somebody is getting invited to Worlds and they have a take on this to make the game better, then there's a large part of me that's like, well, you should just defer to expertise. But on the other hand, I can't help how I feel, and it's my channel, so I'm going to share how a rules change makes me feel and just see if there's anyone else out there on my wavelength, I guess. So feel free to shout me down in the comments and say, no, Phil, they needed to make these changes. I'm not saying they didn't need to make changes, right? These just seem like the most... they're not thoughtful changes. They're not like, okay, this rule's a problem, how do we tweak it and modify it and do some, like, how do we go back to the drawing board and put on our game design hats and work out how we can still have the kind of interaction that we want, but make it a bit more balanced. It's just like, oh, fine, people don't like it, we'll just get rid of it then. And it's like, feels a little bit like the saying sometimes applied to TV shows when the inmates start running the asylum. It's like suddenly the fans are just going, you should do this. They're going, yeah, okay, we'll do that. It's no effort, is it? I don't know. Tie myself in knots. Let's move on. Commandos. So, massive nerfs, I reckon, to Commandos. So, we'll start with the bomb squig. I've highlighted part of the thing here because the first part, the APL not being modified part, was already a rule. They've just added on this second bit. For its bomb squig special rule, make a shooting attack against each other operative within its engagement range instead of visible to within circle of it. So, first of all, I love the fact they've started putting in parentheses the actual implications of the change they've made. They never used to do that. So that's why I haven't had to put a picture of the older bomb squig rules on here. So I can tell you what the change is because they've explained it to you right in the text, which is great. Feels like a massive nerf to the bomb squig. You know, he used to be quite a scary piece that could potentially take out multiple people on your team. Now, you know, it's quite easy for most people to position their models in such a way that the bomb squig's not going to be able to charge 2 or 3 or 4 of them, right? Whereas before, I feel like the bomb squig kind of make a beeline into the middle of your team and be like, really punish you for having your things grouped up near an objective or something like that. So I think that's a big nerf. The chopper has also kind of been nerfed into the ground. So it used to have 4 attacks, and so compared to fists, right, that all the orcs had, the fists had 3 attacks, and the chopper effectively gave you an extra attack and an extra +1/+1 damage to normal and crit. And so now it only does the damage buff, and it means for the Breacher Boy, it's actually not even upgrade over his Breacher Ram. He has well use that, which is again his 3 attacks, but it was 5/5 damage. So yeah, they kind of made the chopper much less kind of meaningful and useful. I think people probably aren't going to take choppers as much, or maybe you'll take one if you've just got the spare points, but it's not going to be a mainstay of your tactics anymore. So like what they've basically done here is the commandos, the non-combat commandos, are now going to be less good in combat. And then a big nerf to Just a Scratch. You can only Just a Scratch normal hits and normal wounds. You can no longer Just a Scratch away a crit. So that's a massive thing, isn't it, really? So I think some big and meaningful nerfs to commandos, for sure. For sure. Vet Guard. So the Spotter Veteran, the Spotter action that treats an enemy operative as it has an engage order, no longer works if you're in cover provided by heavy terrain. So that's a pretty big nerf. Right, it used to work regardless, but now it's got that extra caveat, so that's a big change to the spotter. And the Demolition Veteran has basically been brought into line with every other kind of mine layer type guy in Kill Team. So the bomb goes off when you're within circle rather than being within square. You can't put the damage through heavy terrain. Right, so I remember I played against Vet Guard on Into the Dark a little while ago at a tournament. I was playing against Charles Shepherd, who was one of the best Vet Guard players in the UK, I believe, and he was sort of very, very kindly and patiently explaining to me about just how good the Demolition Veteran was, because it's weird and makes no sense, but it was what the rules said. So now those rules have finally been brought into line with all the other mine layers, and it's just weird that it took this long. But yeah, Demolition Veteran's gone from being a really, really overpowered, I think, piece, especially on Into the Dark, to being pretty good still. You know, I don't think it's bad. I don't think you wouldn't take one, but wouldn't necessarily be an auto take in every single matchup anymore, which is nice. And also you can only plant mine once rather than however often you like, again, in line with all other kind of mine layer guys, which is good. Oh, the Void Dancer troupe. Like, this is one of those things where people have been going on like, oh, Void Dancer. People are saying Void Dancers are too good basically since they came out, right? They no longer all have fly. So they've lost the fly keyword. They've now got the ability flip belts. The operative has the fly keyword for the purposes of moving around across and over other operatives, but each time the operative is climbing or dropping, the total vertical distance is circle. So it's almost like climbing gear more than fly. It's better than climbing gear, but it's almost more like climbing gear now than fly. You can still fly through other operatives. The biggest change on there, which isn't explicitly like written out on the thing, but is obviously implied because of the rules of the way they've written them, is that Void Dancers now have to traverse like everybody else. So they're now going to be slowed down by your barricade. They're going to lose a circular movement for traversing, which is, I think it's pretty massive. Like, Void Dancers are still good. They've still got the invulnerable save. They've still got an Inferno pistol. But that is just a significant, like, their big thing was that they could just be really mobile. So that's a big deal there to Void Dancers, I think. Warp Coven. Oh, there's a lot to talk about with Warp Coven. Big buffs for Warp Coven and one nerf, right? So we'll start off with Exalted Astartes. They've reprinted the entire, they've buffed Exalted Astartes before to let you use it on Rubric Marines and not just on Sorcerers. That's old. What they've changed this time around is made it 0 CP. So you can always shoot twice with any Marine in your team if you didn't perform a fight action. So that's good, right? Kind of brings them up to date with all the other kind of Marine teams now are getting easier and easier access to shooting their bolters twice. Sorcerer's Command. So Warp Covenant, interesting in that the rubrics have 2 APL, and to get that 3rd APL you had to be near a sorcerer, and the distance you had to be near a sorcerer has been getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and now it's red plus blue. Now listen, I've been a long time defender of the colours / the shapes. I think that they were quite cool. It made the game, in my view, quite a lot quicker, you know, with the colours and the measuring tools. But once you start having to say red plus blue, like at that point, let's just go back to inches. Because at that point, you're making it more complicated than it needs to be, right? I have to think about it. Like, what is... Because I'm playing Kill Team so long, what's blue? Blue's 3. And what's red? Red 6, right? So it's 9, like, just write 9 inches, and then... everyone can use a tape measure. Like, I respect what they were trying to do with the colours, and it's one of those things where I actually am fluent in colours, and it always kind of weirds me out when I'm playing against somebody and they're still mentally converting everything back to inches, and they go, oh, sorry, 6 inches, and my brain just like, 6 inches? That too blue, or is that too white? Which is, you know, I'm comfortable playing with the colours, but if they're gonna do red plus blue, like, obviously they've reached the limits of the system, and if they want to discard the system and go back to using a tape measure, they should do it. I think persisting with this, where we're having to do weird symbol math, like, what made the symbols good was that you had your measuring tool, and it had its 3 sides, and that was it. You go da 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 da, right? Yeah, inches, I think, for Kill Team 2024. Let me know in the comments, because that's going to be a big talking point, right? Tzaangor now have 9 wounds. Now that seems quite significant. It's a weird one to me in that Tzaangor have gone up to 9 wounds, but the rest of these changes make me really want it. If I was to play Warp Coven, the rest of these changes make you really want to play all elites, right? So they've given all your Marines the ability to fight twice. They've basically made it so they're going to be AP3 most of the time, unless you're in kind of a failure state. And then they're going to say, oh, Tzaangor have 9 wounds. Like, well, Tzaangor are a bit better, but you've made Marines so much better. Like, I'm still probably not going to... I'm sure there's some people out there that think Tzaangor are great, and are like, yeah, my Tzaangor are even better now. But for me, it's like, well... I'm still not really going to take the Tzaangor, I don't think, just because the other buffs you've handed out. Psychic powers. So these now persist until the end of the turning point. Instead of the end of the turning point, they persist until that operative's next activation. So once you throw out a psychic power, as long as you keep that operative alive, you can keep that psychic power on indefinitely if that's what you want to do. There's no longer that gap where it gets deactivated and you have to reactivate that miniature to turn that back on. However, which is a good thing, right? However, the main psychic power that they wanted to keep always activated like that was ephemeral instability, which was removed circle of your movement, right? It's now only 1 inch of your movement that's gone away. So yeah, swings and roundabouts there. I think we'll see this more when we get onto the Hierotek slide. I think they've basically decided that these kinds of abilities that are big movement debuffs are too powerful, or at least too negative to the way the game works. So they seem to have wanted to tone them down quite a little bit. Another little buff they've got is Arcane Robes. So, couldn't remember what Arcane Robes did, so I printed it there down the bottom for you. So, Arcane Robes used to be once per battle. When you would take crit damage, you can ignore it. And now you can do that once per turning point. So, that's a nice little buff as well. Okay. Warp Coven looking really good. And I'm looking, I think, to go back to an elite team. Probably going to do Night Lords. But, like, Warp Coven are interesting. My problem is that I just don't like the Tutankhamun hats and the colours of Warp Coven. So, if I was ever to do them, I'd have to think about how I was going to make them a bit different to that. But they do look pretty good, especially I think in the 6 Marine form of them. Tzaangor's on 9 wounds is pretty good as well, but I think overall these are a buff for the 6 Marine version of Warp Coven. Fellgor Kimband, I think Fellgor Kimband got a weird selection of buffs. So they got close combat focus buffs for the recruit. So the Kill Broker and the Stalker both got an extra attack. Obviously, an extra attack's always pretty cool. Fine. The Tracker has Mark for the Hunt and From the Eye Above. and now he can't perform them in engagement range. It used to be you can't perform them when you're in red of enemy operative, so yeah, you're more likely to get those abilities off over and over and over again. That's good. The Crew Hounds have changed from J2 to J1. Is that a buff or a nerf? Like, on the one hand, it's a buff because you've got an extra activation now to try and like use up your opponent's activations with. But on the other hand, like being able to have one turn where you got to do things with 2 separate models is interesting, and did open up additional possibilities for the team. It seems a bit nothing. Like, it just seems a bit nothingy for the Fast Stalkers. I don't think it's going to have a massive effect on them. If you're a Crew player, let me know. Like, do these changes excite you? They just seem a bit, yeah, here's a little bit. When I just, like, I understand nobody wants a team to go from not that great to, like, amazingly overpowered and do the AdMech thing where then they have to be nerfed back down. But compared to, like, what, the Thousand Suns changes were exciting. These don't seem particularly exciting to me. I could be wrong. Let's look at Hierotek's Circle. So it's overall a buff for the Hierotek Circle, for sure, and a little bit of internal balancing as well. So the first one they got is a Reanimation Protocol's ability. So their ability to reanimate, essentially they're reanimating on a 2+. I'm a bit conflicted about that in a weird sort of way. Obviously, it's a large buff. Going from a 3+ to a 2+ is great. But when something's a 2+, you sort of feel weirdly let down when it doesn't happen, because suddenly 2+ pushes it, at least in my brain, towards like much more towards certain. And so I'm going, well, this is going to happen, then he's going to get up, and this is going to happen, and he's going to get up, and this is going to happen, and he's going to get up, and then it's going to be like a feels bad man where it's like, I actually rolled a 1. I actually rolled a 1 for my Hierotek Circle. This guy didn't get up. My whole plan kind of came tumbling down. So 2-ups, we're like that in a lot of Games Workshop games, right? Often, like, you have armor saves of 2+, and you have things that happen on a 2+, and it's a thing that's in the game. It is a buff. It might not. Any reservation I have about it is purely within my mind. It is to a scientifically minded person, it is just a straight buff. So that's good. I've never been accused of being a scientifically minded person. The Chronomancer's Nanomine takes a nerf. So the Chronomancer's Nanomine used to subtract circle from the distance it can move from anyone within red. Now it's you have to be within blue, and it only subtracts down to a minimum of 2 circle. So quite a nerf to the counter-temporal nanomine. I do think they've decided that these kind of movement limiting abilities need toning down. I have heard some Hierotek players, people that have done quite well with Hierotek, they go, no, I still think the Chronomancer is the pick. Now, it could be Cope, because the Chronomancer is the one they've got built and painted, right? But I have heard that in a couple of times from a couple of people, which surprises me a little bit. So let me know in the comments if you think the Chronomancer is still the pick. The Technomancer got a nice quality of life buff, though. The Technomancer's operatives rights of reanimation action, which I have printed on the screen for you just down here. Delete the first paragraph, so it's no longer until the end of the turning point they gain the following ability for 1 AP. It's now just an ability they have. Once in this turning point, when another friendly Hierotek Circle operative will be incapacitated first time during the battle, if it's visible to and within red of this operative, the operative can use the ability. The friendly Hierotek Circle operative attempts the animation, but if you use it, you subtract 1 from the APL. So what this means is, effectively, the ability is the same, but you no longer have to, like, pre-buff it. Like, before you'd be like, have to be like, oh, I'm going to turn on my rights of reanimation. And then if you turn it on, and then none of your Necrons ever died, visible to you and within red, you'd have spent an APL doing nothing. So now, it's turned on all the time, but you only lose the APL as and when you actually use it. Which means the Technomancer basically is doing the same thing, but you don't have this weird, like, occasionally you'll waste an AP turning something on that you don't then use, which is good. Also means if you've already activated your Technomancer, right, and used its APL that turn, and then it's just standing there, and then you get this ability as well, it's like you've had an extra APL, right? Yeah, that's how that works, right? I'm just, so you already activated in, done 3 things, move, shoot, like whatever else you want to do, loot an objective, whatever you're doing. And then you'll get an APL modifier later in turn after. So you're always going to try and activate your Technomancer, aren't you? Like first, and put him somewhere, and then, yeah. So it is a buff. It is a quality of life thing, but it also can just about be classed as a proper buff as well. We've also got the Pyromancer, the Psychomancer. I can't read. So the Conjure Trauma action that I reproduced down here. You select one enemy operative visible to this operative. Until the end of the turning point, it's treated as being injured, regardless of things that say it can't be. And in addition, you now roll a d6, and if it's higher than its APL, it's -1 APL as well. Which is alright, it's good, it's a buff, yep. For me now, I think the Technomancer is the pick over the other two. But like I say, I've heard some people that do really well with this team saying, no, it's still the Chronomancer, actually. The Psychomancer buff doesn't really excite me, but I could be wrong about that. Let me know in the comments if you're a Hierotek player, what your thoughts are on this. A Prentech operative going to 3 APL is pretty cool. Yeah, that's a straight up, that's a big buff, isn't it? Good. Let's have a look at the Hearthkyn salvagers. So the first one is, this is a weird buff. The Dozer operative's Nux Smash action. Add the following sentence. This operative can then perform a free charge action of up to blue, even if it's performed an action during the activation that prevents it from doing so. So let's look at Nux Smash. Select one enemy operative within the operative's engagement range. You can move the enemy operative up to blue, and it suffers D3 plus 1 mortal wounds. If the D3 results in a 3, subtract 1 from the enemy operative's APL in addition. For the move, the fly keyword has no effect. The enemy operative must finish in the location it can be placed, can't move to the edge of the kill zone, through any part of another model's base, or through a terrain feature, and it has an insignificant trait. So the thing is, you're a 2 APL model. So you're not charging somebody to get into engagement range and then doing the Nux Smash and then still being able to fight because you've charged into them with your follow-up move that you have now. So I guess it's useful for when, if they've got someone on an objective, right, you can charge them, Nux Smash them off the objective, which you could always do. And then I guess rather than you stay on the objective with no APL, you could then follow them up and be in combat with them, which might protect you from shooting, which is quite interesting and cool, yeah. Or if you started the turn in combat with them, right, you could start with a Nux Smash and get the extra, and then move them. And you don't even have to move them. You could start the thing with a Nux Smash and then follow up with a fight and have done D3 plus 1 wounds before your fight action. But you could always do that because it was always you can move the enemy operative up to blue. So you could always, if you just wanted the extra damage, you could always have Nux Smashed, moved them nothing, and then fought, right? I think. But yeah. Interesting change. I think it's a bit weird and situational. I don't know how much it's going to change overall. And then some Locktar changes that I don't think are really, like, they are buffs, but I don't uncomplicatedly think that they're buffs. They're just kind of reactions to the evolving meta and things that are happening overall. So the first one is a change to early detection. So Locktar operatives early detection. In addition, enemy operatives cannot move until the firefight phase of the first turning point. So early detection basically turns off abilities to set up outside the drop zone or moving with the recon scouting option, and now it also turns off things like the ploy they've just given to the Night Lords, where the Night Lords get to make a move for spending, if they spend a CP, they get to move 2 circles, things like that. So they're just keeping up, they're keeping the Locktar early detection ability doing what it was supposed to do in light of new things they've added to the game. Like, they want to say, no, it still works on that new way of doing this thing. Right, I think again when we get to the new edition, we'll get a sort of tying together of all these kind of advanced move mechanics, so they all more do the same thing they do now. I mean, you've seen that a bit with the Beta Decima changes, where it's effectively like a 2-circle move for advanced deployment now. Like, I think the whole thing will eventually become a 2-circle move. I think that's where we're headed. The Pan-Spectral Scan it's just an Auspex type action that they've handed out removes obscuring to. I've already talked about that. This is something that they've been doing. They did it in the last sort of round of changes. They handed out remove obscuring to a lot more of these kind of other Auspex type things because they wanted removed obscuring to become part of the game. I thought at the time it was to do with Better Decima. They just changed, as I've said, how the Better Decima vote works, but they're still very much on this change of getting people having an operative that removes obscuring, which is still cool. But I think these are general buffs. I don't think any of this is going to massively change the power level of Hearthkyn salvagers. Really, like it changes them in some matchups. But I don't think it's going to be a massive. I don't think it's a massive change of balance. It's just kind of keeping them up to date with some of the new game paradigms that are establishing themselves in the wider meta. Right, so they're not bad changes. I just don't feel they're going to be, not going to be a big deal. The Fellgor ravagers. So Fellgor ravagers call the attack ability. Einhorn's call of attack ability. The selected operative now has to be visible to and within red of this operative. So this is call the attack, where once in each strategy phase, when it's your turn to use strategic deploy or pass, you can use this ability instead. If you do, select one friendly Fellgor ravager operative visible to this operative, the selected operative and all friendly Fellgor ravager operatives visible to and within white can perform a free dash. So now you can only do it to someone that your Einhorn can see and is within red of him. He is a model that he can see and is within red of himself, so he can always do it to himself to get a free dash. So it is a change, it is a nerf. I think probably a significant nerf, because previously you could target it anywhere on the board where you had a few goats standing together. Now it's much more limited. A pretty significant change. The Gnarl Scars, uncompromising attacks. You can only select an auto pistol for the action shooting attack. So just to remind, the uncompromising attack was 1 AP to fight then shoot, or vice versa, and you can shoot while in engagement range of an enemy operative, but if you do, you must target an enemy operative within engagement range, even if other friendly operatives are within the enemy operative's engagement range. And Fellgor have crack grenades on their equipment roster, so this basically stops you from using that ability to throw a crack grenade into somebody's lap as they're trying to fight you in close combat, as funny as that would be. They changed War Paint to be 2 EP, so War Paint, just to remind you, was 1 EP, so you could go, yeah, all War Paint if that's what you wanted to do, and it would just let you ignore any and all modifiers to your movement and APL, i.e. from being injured most commonly, and I guess they decided that was obnoxious. They decided to make it so you couldn't just go all War Paint. So that's that. And then we've got the Death Knell Operative's War Gong ability, no effect when the Death Knell Operative has a Frenzy token. So the War Gong ability, each time an attack dice would inflict critical damage on a friendly Fellgor Ravager operative within blue of this operative, you can choose the attack dice to inflict a normal hit. And it's because of how they've changed Frenzy, so that being hit with a crit with a ranged weapon will kill a frenzied goat now. Being hit with a normal just sits there and does nothing. So obviously the War Gong became better. It will still benefit other frenzied goats. It just stops working that way once the goat holding it, the Death Knell, is actually frenzied, which makes sense. When you are frenzied, you probably aren't thinking about playing a nice little tune on your gong to keep your fellow goats happy. You're probably just thinking about rip and tear for corn or whatever. So makes sense, right? These are nerfs. Do I think they're really significant nerfs? I think the call the attack nerf is significant. Yeah, probably. They're probably going to feel this a little bit. Yeah. And finally, Chaos Cult. So, 2 changes. The Winged Accursive Gift, delete first bullet point. So here's the Winged Accursive Gift for you. Each time the operative performs an action in which it moves, ignore any or all modifiers to its movement characteristic. So it doesn't do that anymore. It's just ignore the first circle for climbs, drops, or traverses. Okay. That seems like a very small targeted nerf. And then on the other hand, they've lost an entire ass operative. So they just get 1 less devotee. I guess that this team is still regarded as deeply problematic at high levels, because otherwise they wouldn't have taken away an entire devotee. Now, sadly, I know people who weren't reliably winning every game with Chaos Cult before the last round of nerfs, right? So, like, now to get a second round of nerfs to a team, it feels bad for a lot of more casual players. I feel like this is a team that must have now quite a high skill floor and quite a high skill ceiling. So if you know what you're doing, you probably still dominate with them, but there is that skill floor of trying to get up there to the point where you know what you're doing. And they're rapidly becoming a team I just regard as poorly designed in that regard, right? Final thoughts. Like I said at the top of the video, a wide-ranging Dataslate that changes a lot of things that have been in the game for a long time. Do you have any thoughts or feelings to share? Like, oh, Phil, you totally glossed over this one change that's going to totally change the way I play. Let me and everyone else in the community know in the comments down below. Please do like, subscribe, join the Discord, etc. You know, if this is how you found out about the Balanced Dataslate, then I'm providing a service, and a subscription is free, and it really helps me out, you know, helps the channel get noticed by other people out there. And if you really want to help, you could become a channel member, which is a monthly subscription. Big thank you to all my members, as always, but especially to Nightfall and Massive Crit, who are subscribed at the highest of the 3 tiers and therefore get a shout out at the end of every single video. Thank you very much, lads. It's much appreciated. Right, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you again next time. Cheery, cheery, bye. Bye, bye, bye. Goodbye.